Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. King Yudhishthira said, O my Lord, I am the most sinful man. Just see my heart, which is full of ignorance. This body, which is ultimately meant for others, has killed many, many phalanxes of men. Purport, a solid phalanx of 21,870 chariots, 21,870 elephants, 109,650 infantry, and 65,000 cavalry is called an Akshohini. And many Akshohinis were killed on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Maharaj Yudhishthira, as the most pious king of the world, takes for himself the responsibility for killing such a huge number of living beings because the battle was fought to reinstate him on the throne. This body is, after all, meant for others. While there is life in the body, it is meant for the service of others. And when it is dead, it is meant to be eaten by dogs and jackals or maggots. He is sorry because for such a temporary body, such a huge massacre was committed. Prabhupada, giving a class on this verse, dilated at some length on who does this body belong to? This body. Who does the body belong to? Is it my body? Everything's ultimately Krishna's, but just analyze. Prabhupada was analyzing. You can't say exactly it's your body because you didn't produce it. And then whose is it? The father's or the mother's? Or it may be they produce, the father and the mother produce the body. But then the body is working hard for others. You leave your father and your mother and you work to maintain your wife and your children, so maybe it belongs to the wife and the children. Or then maybe it belongs to the maggots. When you're done, they have the system of burying the body, so it belongs to the maggots. Or if you just die in a field, or if you're a pasi, not many pasis, but the body is put out on a tower, and just for the vultures to come and eat. So it becomes the property of the vultures. Sometimes you see on the rivers the dead body floating down, and the vultures will be having their breakfast. Sometimes even dogs, you see in the middle of the river, a dog sitting on the dead body and eating. So then the body belongs to the dog or the vulture. It's become his property. Who does it belong to? We're thinking my body. Prabhupada was emphasizing this point. It's not even if you think that I am this body, still you can't say it belongs to you. That system was there, it's slavery. That the body, the people, they had no right to over their own body. They could be just bought and sold. So there was something like that in Vedic culture, not exactly. The Shudras, who were under a master, they couldn't be bought or sold. There's not that system. They could be given away. You find that for dowry, sometimes they'd give men, maid servants and servants, so they'd be given in charity, but not sold. So Prabhupada dilated on that at some length, how we're not the body, but even if we think I'm this body, that's also a mistake. It's difficult to say who actually it belongs to. We spend the whole life thinking, I am this body is mine. But who does it belong to actually? That story is given, I don't know if it's in the original Valmiki Ramayana, but it's at least it's told about Valmiki himself, that he was supposed to have been a dacoit, an armed robber, I guess you'd say in English. So he was stealing, and then Narad Muni asked that you're stealing, and you have to get some sinful reaction for that. You'll have to suffer for that. And no way, you'll have to suffer alone for that. You're stealing to maintain your family, but alone you'll have to suffer. So, my family is also enjoying the results, so they can also enjoy the bad result. The same word is there. oh, you'll have to enjoy the bad result also. And Narad said, well, why don't you go and ask them? See, ask your wife and children if they want to suffer the sinful reactions that you'll have to get with the stealing. So Valmiki said, asked us. So, I'm robbing, yeah, we know. And I maintain you like that, yes. And there's simple reaction for that, yes. So you're sharing what I'm stealing, and you're going to share the simple reaction. So, no. But I'm doing my job as a wife, and you're doing your job, and you take your reactions, and I'll take mine. I'm a good pious wife, so I'll get the result of that. And you do any pious activities, I'll share that. But sinful activities, forget it. You look after yourself. So this is a folk story, actually. I don't think it's an original. It's told like that. It's an instructive story. That the wife and children, they're thinking that yes, the husband, he's committed to do this for us. But reactions we won't. He will have to take. So Yudhishthira Maharaj was thinking in the same way, actually, that I have to take the reaction for this. For killing so many people. I mean, if we hear someone's been killed, we become very sorry. Especially if it's someone we know. Or nowadays, there's so much killing and so much death, and it's all on the TV and the newspapers. And you read in the newspapers 50 people killed in a bus accident. I guess it doesn't happen so much in this country. And again, in India, it's almost a daily occurrence. It won't even come in the national news. Maybe in a little thing like this. 50 people. Especially going up to Badrinath, coming down to us. The bus driver just misses the turn, and they go on a flight. So there's a bus full of people just killed. It's very common. Or you see in India, every day in India you see 12 people killed in Kashmir. It's so many people. But if it's someone we know, or if it happens in front of us, then we feel very affected. If you hear, oh, such and such a person died, you feel. So what to speak of? Here we're talking about actually millions of people being killed. And every one of them, all the fighters, they weren't sannyasis, they all had wives, children. So much distress. So much distress was caused. And Yudhishthira Maharaj, he's thinking, this is all for me. I'm responsible. This we can understand, this is an action of Yoga Maya, because Arjuna had already understood from hearing Bhagavad-gita. Arjuna had the same feeling before the Bhagavad, that I don't want to fight because there's so much killing and so many bad things will come from this. But Krishna had told him that you work for me. If you do work for me, then I will set free you from all sinful reactions. I will free you from all sinful reactions. Work done on behalf of the Supreme Lord, that doesn't bring any sinful reaction. So actually Yudhishthira, he wasn't fighting on his own behalf, but for the desire of the Lord. But he was thinking it's for my own self-aggrandizement. Therefore he felt very sorry. In this way he's different, say, from modern rulers who don't care at all. You can say practically any leader of any country, unless maybe it's a very small country, maybe like Slovenia or something. But any leader of any major country, either major in influence or major in population, they all have blood on their hands. They're all killing. So many people have been killed to get them in that position, or having attained that position, they're going to kill so many people. Just like you see this recently, they went into Iraq and killed so many people in the name of freeing them from the torture of Saddam. And then instead of him, why should he have the right to torture them? We'll kill them and we'll kill a bunch of people. It's better to be killed by an American than killed by an Iraqi. See, you get the pious benefit of being killed by an American. So they have so many ways to justify, but actually there's so much killing going on, and all these politics means dirty. So every politician killing their opponents and this and that. And of course, in the Western countries we don't hear so much about it, but all have their agents all over the world and pulling down guys, arranging assassinations and so many different things. So it's a dirty profession. At least in the Vedic times, there was all this assassination actually that didn't take place until the beginning of Kali Yuga. Generally that wasn't taking place. Duryodhana was trying to do to the Pandavas. He tried to poison Bhimasena. It's an assassination attempt. Then he tried to have the 5 Pandavas burned in the house of Lak. But if you see in the Bhagavatam, it's very interesting to see the whole list of kings, the dynasties of the great kings. And one succeeded another. And there was politics going on. It wasn't that there wasn't politics. That's described how each king would have to have his spies. Ramchandra himself went out as a spy to find out. He disguised himself and went out to find out what's going on in the kingdom. Krishna would also do. You'll find in the description of Krishna's daily activities that sometimes he would, among the many things he would do, one of the things was sometimes he'd disguise himself and go out among the populace and find out what they're doing, what they're saying, what they're thinking. So the king could find out what the people are thinking about me, and if there's any plotting going on. And then every king had to have his spies. So that was going on, but actual assassination, you'll find that one king succeeded another. But then in Kali Yuga, the beginning of, when the description of the dynasty comes into Kali Yuga, then you'll find that so-and-so assassinated so-and-so, and then he became the king. This practically began in Kali Yuga. So, and Duryodhana was trying to do unsuccessfully against the Pandavas. But, of course, that was at the end of Dwapara Yuga also. The Sandhya, practically. The in-between period between Dwapara and Kali Yuga. So killing, that was going on in political affairs, but by open fight, not by stabbing in the back. There'd be a fight and all the Kshatriyas would line up, and they'd fight, and whoever was the strongest, they'd take the kingdom. That was the system. But it was understood that who is pious, they will be favored. The kings, they would uphold the whole Vedic society was working on sacrifice. They'd have these big sacrifices. Kings would perform big sacrifices. All the upper caste people, the caste people, the upper caste people, that means Brahmanas, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, and daily they would perform sacrifice in their home, little sacrifice, at least once a day, little fire sacrifice. But the kings especially, they would organize very big sacrifices, in which all the populace would take place, and then all the grains, ghee that is produced by the Vaishyas, so much would be offered into the fire, and all the Brahmanas would come and they would get charity, all the Kshatriyas would come and they'd show their subordination to the ruling king. So like this, and the Shudras, there's a lot of work. They had to build pandals and platforms, and they had to carry so much things. So it was a big social and cultural event, and ultimately religious event, in which by offering sacrifice, then all the endeavors of human society came together in that sacrifice, which is ultimately offered for Vishnu. And in this way, the whole society, everything, all the activities of the Varnashram society was ritually offered to Lord Vishnu. And in this way, the piety of the whole society was upheld. And the king, he had to rule according to dharma, rule under the direction of brahmanas. And now, why they were doing that? Ruling according to dharma. The saintly kings, no doubt, Rajarshis, maybe, but also they had the belief, which was a fact, that if they rule according to dharma, then what is that? Dharma rakshati rakshataha. Who protects dharma? They are protected by dharma. Dharma actually means Vishnu, ultimately. So by observing the rules of dharma, they would get strength to rule over. Their strength came, although there was politics and political diplomacy and all these kind of things, but ultimately they accepted that their strength came from dharma. And the Kshatriyas, they would keep with them Brahmanas, and they were, or if the Brahmanas would be the ministers, and also there are Brahmanas in the forest, and they would. The most important duty of the Kshatriyas was to protect the Brahmanas, Brahminical culture, and cows. And by doing this, they would gain. Why they did this? For their future benefit, for the benefit of all of human society, and so that they could continue ruling. Because they knew that if they didn't rule according to dharma, then the Brahmanas would kick them out, or another Kshatriya would come and kick them out, because their power came from dharma. This Yudhishthira, he understood that he got his power from dharma. That was understood at the beginning of the battle of Kurukshetra. Dharma Kshetri, Kurukshetra, Salaveta, Yutsava, Mamakam, Pandavaschaya, Kimakurvata Sanjaya. Dhritarashtra was asking. Prabhupada mentions in the purport, he was asking that, when my sons and the sons of Pandu assembled at Kurukshetra, which is also Dharma Kshetra, because Maharaj Kuru performed so many sacrifices at Kurukshetra, therefore it's become a very pious place, and is mentioned it's mentioned by Manu, that this is the most pious place, this tract of land, Kurukshetra. So that's a place for performing pious. This means, according to Karma Kanda, pious activities. So what did they do when they came together? What happened? They came there desirous to fight. What happened when my sons and the sons of Pandu came? What was going on? So obviously they were going to fight. That was not really the question. But what was the result? So Dhritarashtra himself, Prabhupada comments, by using the term Dharmakshetra, this is a place of dharma, that already he understood that the Pandavas must have been successful. From the external calculation, it seemed that the Kauravas, they must be successful, because their strength, the strength of their manpower was more. And they actually had the best warriors also. Even though Arjuna was very powerful, then Karna was his match, or even maybe somewhat more powerful. Probably Karna was more powerful than Arjuna. And then Bhim, he was also very powerful. But his match was there in Duryodhana. And then on the Kaurava, of course there are many great fighters on the Pandava, Yudhishthira Maharaj. So Yudhishthira Maharaj himself was not such a great fighter. But on the other side, on the Kaurava side, they had Bhishma, Drona. So they're very, very powerful. So in terms of numbers and in terms of the numbers, that was important. But then when you have Maharathis and people who can kill thousands and thousands at one time, then numbers, it's just a matter of, it's just a consideration. When you have 1,000 men up against Bhishma, it's just a delaying tactic, that's all. It's just the amount of time it takes for him to kill them all. So it seemed that was Duryodhana's plan, that why he had the Pandavas exiled. He had them exiled because he thought that in the meantime, while they're away for 12 or 13 years, then I'll build up my forces. I have the royal treasure at my disposal, so I can buy people off. That practically happened with Bhishma and Drona, even though they knew he was a rascal. But they thought, anyway, he's the king, so it's our duty to... We live with... We're Kshatriyas, and we live... Drona, he was a Brahmana acting as a Kshatriya. So we live with... Kshatriyas live with Kshatriyas, and then I'm supposed to... And Bhishma is living with Drona and trying to give some good advice to Dhritarashtra, so he's living with him, and then he felt, I'm obliged to fight for him also, having lived with him for so many years. So that was Duryodhana's plan, and he didn't expect even Yudhishthira Maharaj to be able to assemble any kind of army. after being away for so many years. But anyway, Yudhishthira Maharaj was able to, because the people remembered him and they knew that Yudhishthira Maharaj, he was the right person to rule on behalf of Dharma. And that Duryodhana, even though he's ruling, and there might not be that much difference in day-to-day life of most people, whether Duryodhana rules or Yudhishthira rules, but they wanted that Yudhishthira would rule because he was a pious king. They knew that by being in the kingdom of Duryodhana, that all their activities that they were doing, if they have to be offered through this king, who is inimical to Vishnu, then what is the gain? What is the benefit? We won't get any pious result from that. Whereas if we live under Yudhishthira, because he's pious, then everything will be very nice in the kingdom. It won't be disturbed. It won't be full of intrigue and evil as it will be with Duryodhana. And that everything that we do, that will be offered through Yudhishthira, because he's a pure devotee of Krishna. That will be, even if people, they didn't understand that the goal of life is pure devotion to Krishna, they could understand that he's a very pious king, dharmic. He follows dharma. So by following him, or by being ruled by him, that will be very auspicious for us in the long term. So Dhritarashtra was asking that, what was the actual result? He was hopeful that his sons would, that's the whole plot, he was hopeful that his sons would be successful. But actually he knew, even before asking Sanjay, he knew that my sons cannot be successful in that fight. He knew that. Time and time again, afterwards, after the battle, he confessed that actually I knew there was no hope. Actually, in my heart, I knew there was no hope about being successful. From the very beginning, even from when I saw Arjuna, even at the Swayamvar of Draupadi, hit that target which no one else could hit. Then even at that time, I knew that I had no hope of any victory of my son. I knew my sons could not be successful. He gave so many reasons, recounting the whole story of the Pandavas. That when my sons were arrested by the Gandharva king, and they were actually humiliated by the Pandavas in this, because the Pandavas released them. Then at that time I knew, on hearing this news, I knew I had no hope of victory. There's no hope for my sons. When I heard that Krishna, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he was on the side of the Pandavas, even though he had promised not to fight. Then I knew there's no hope of victory for my sons. So in so many ways, he knew all the signs were against him. All the indications were there. That even though numerically the Pandavas were outnumbered, and even though the greatest fighters were on the side of the Kauravas, that Dhritarashtra, overseeing the situation, understood there's no hope of victory. It was a foolish war. That Duryodhana is foolhardy in entering this war. He thought he could win by his calculations and his plans. There was no need for any war. Duryodhana should have... Anyway, there was no need. He should have just given the Yudhishthira his minimal, deserved half the kingdom. Actually, he should have taken all the kingdom. He should have given that. But even if he calculated, we shall fight, but he should have understood, I can't win, because for so many reasons he couldn't win. The main reason being Jayastu Pandu Putranam Yesham Pakshe Janada. The main reason that the sons of Pandu, they must be successful because Janardana, Krishna, is on their side, even if he doesn't want to fight. His name is Janardana, which has different meanings. One meaning is who kills those he wants to kill. So even he may not be personally fighting, but if he wants, that Krishna himself showed Arjuna that you don't want to fight, but these men are already dead. It's just you're seeing them standing here. Have a good look at them. You like your friends. You see here your gurus, your cousin brothers, your friends, your nephew, you like them? Have a good look, because they're all going to be dead. They won't survive. I've already decided they're all killed by me. Sometimes people, they protest, what is this? It's killing, it's God. One man was saying to me once, my Jesus is the Prince of Peace, and your Krishna is always killing people. Actually, if you see the Bible, it's also full of killing. The Old Testament, it's some war story. So many horrible things in the Old Testament. But anyway, God is killing. If you say that our Jesus is the Prince of Peace, but then anyway, if you say He's God, then anyway, it's under His direction people are dying also. So that's Krishna's good grace on others, that they are killed by Him or even in His presence. There's so many people that were killed on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, but in Krishna's presence. So they all attain liberation. That special dispensation of Krishna, that if they're killed personally, directly in my presence, then that is one of the symptoms of the Supreme Lord that sets Him apart even from, not only from ordinary beings, not only from great personalities like Lord Brahma, but even above Lord Shiva. That is one of the 4 special symptoms of Narayana, that He is the bestower of liberation upon those He kills. So one way or the other, everyone is killed, but if one is killed by Krishna or in the presence of Krishna, then they attain liberation. So that is Krishna's special mercy. But Yudhishthira Maharaj was thinking, they've all been killed for me. Now this is Yogamaya, because Yudhishthira Maharaj, he knew the message of Bhagavad-gita also, that Arjuna was reluctant to fight, and Krishna convinced him that you have to, anyway, all these people are killed by me, but nimittamatra bhava savyasachi. You are very expert in fighting with both your hands. Savyasachi means one who he can wield his bows and arrows with both hands. Ambidextrous is like this or like that, either way. So he's very expert in fighting and he's trained for that. But ultimately he's thinking he's killing. He's not the killer. Ultimately you're not the killer. And those who are killed, they're not killed. Because ultimately everyone is spirit soul, and ultimately everything is done. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha ahankara. Iti ahankara, what is that? Ahankara iti amepra. What is it? I'm getting mixed up with that other verse. Karta hamiti maniti. He thinks that the person who's overcome by false ego, he thinks that I am the doer. So it may be said that the conditioned soul is the doer, but only in a secondary sense, because ultimately man proposes and God disposes. We have desire to do something, but we can only do that if that is sanctioned by the Supreme Lord. So everything is going on under the direction of the Supreme Lord, and specifically this battle was actually the wish of the Supreme Lord. The wish of the Supreme Lord, He came for that purpose. Bhubhaharam, to take away the unnecessary weight of the sinful Kshatriyas, to relieve the world of that burden. So Krishna came for that purpose, and that was done especially through Arjuna and Bhima and others, that the world was rid of such a huge number of people, which seems like a very horrible thing. So many people have to die. But anyway, they have to die. Everyone has to die. Kshatriya, if he dies in the battle, even if Krishna is not present, if he's fighting for dharma, then he attains a good result. He either goes to the heavenly planets, or if he dies in battle, then he goes to the heavenly planets. And if he wins, then he atova prapchasi swargam. If you killed Krishna told Arjuna, then you go to Svargaloka. Jitva va bhokshase mahim. And if you win the battle, then you'll enjoy the earth. So either way, it's a good deal for a kshatriya. So at the same time, he has to fight, but at the same time, he has to understand that ultimately, I'm not the doer. It's very difficult to imagine that. If you're in the middle of a battle and you're fighting, you have to be fully concentrated on what you're doing. It's difficult to remember that actually I'm not the doer, Krishna's the doer. But Arjuna was told, you have to remember that ultimately you are not the doer. But by remembering that, you actually get strength. If we think I am the doer, then we become subject to disappointment. And this is not some theoretical thing, this is practical psychology. We don't have to go to some university course to study psychology. Everything's in Bhagavad-gita. So this practical psychology, that if we think I am the doer, then we become disappointed, because it's the nature of this material world that what we try to do, it will not always be successful. Someone may have very good karma, someone like Napoleon, Hitler, they have for some time, it's kind of mixed karma, that they have some ability to conquer over. But then you see that Napoleon, he was exiled. He died as a prisoner in exile. And Hitler, he shot himself, so we're told. So ultimately it all ended in infamy. Their plans, for some time it appeared they were doing so well and so nicely. Ultimately it all collapsed. Disappointment. So a devotee may experience that also. I mean, it's the psychology of book distribution. Devotees are distributing books, and then after saying, I'm doing great, I'm doing wonderful. Then all of a sudden what happens? When you think like that, I'm doing so great, I'm distributing so many books. Then what happens? You can't distribute a single book. All of a sudden, you're the greatest book distributor. I am the greatest. He all of a sudden finds out I can't distribute a single book. Why? Because you think I am the doer. So if we remember that Krishna, I simply have to become his instrument, then everything goes very nicely. So Arjuna is being advised in the middle of the battle where you have to concentrate. So if you're a split second not concentrating, and not only concentrating, but on one point where you have to concentrate on everyone all around you, because you can be attacked from all sides. Arjuna in his youth, that he pleased Dronacharya by fixing his eye on one point. When they came for the test after Drona had trained them for so long, that Yudhishthira come. There's this bird, some kind of toy bird in the tree. You have to shoot the bird. Okay, aim. Now tell me, what do you see? I see the bird. What else do you see? I see the tree. What else do you see? I see everything. Go away. So he was calling so many like this, and he called Arjuna and said, what do you see? I see the bird. What else do you see? I don't see anything. What do you see on the bird? I only see the eye of the bird. Okay, shoot. So his concentration just on the one point. But on the battlefield, you can't do that. It's not a shooting contest where you just gradually fix and then when you're ready you shoot. It's not like that. Because you have to be aware of everything all around you all at once. And at least from the back, they're not supposed to be shooting, but at least in a radius of 180 degrees. There's in front of you and then arrows coming from above, and you don't know anything can happen. The chariot's moving, it requires so much concentration. But Krishna told Arjuna, Mam anusmara yuddha. Your first business is to remember me and fight. Now you have to fight, and that's going to take all your concentration. But on top of that, not only Do you have to fight and remember me, but you have to remember me and fight, round the other way? So it seems it may be very difficult. How to do that? How to remember Krishna? But if you don't remember Krishna, then we cannot be successful. As Prabhupada said, things without Krishna don't work. What's wrong in human society? They made so many plans that they will make. Just like Germany is like the epitome of materialism. Oh, nice roads, nice economy, nice cars, all arrangements. And everything will be very nice. But what's wrong with it all? Why is there nevertheless so many problems in society? What is the reason? It is the government. Throw it out. Get another government. Another government comes in. Same problem. Or maybe just a little bit. It's the Turks. It's all their fault. Well, you call them in. And even if you throw them out, it doesn't mean that life's going to be perfect. So we may give so many reasons, but ultimately the reason is that things without Krishna don't work. There's no remembrance of Krishna. So we have to remember Krishna. And then we may say, well, even if you remember Krishna, things may not go right. And we have a very good example. It's called the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Things may not go right, even if we're trying. And even you see, sometimes people think that, well, when Prabhupada was here, it was just all bliss. And it was, but it doesn't mean that everything went right all the time. It was everything. It's because Prabhupada was always, we were so crazy, Prabhupada was just putting things back into shape again after we spoil everything all the time. So, even Prabhupada himself, fully Krishna conscious. But the nature of this material world is that it's always full of problems. Actually, that was the first line I ever read in Prabhupada's books. That was the Krishna book, volume 2. That in Vrindavan, Krishna was the cynosure of all lives, but this material world is so contaminated that even in Vrindavan, there were disturbances from demons. Of course, Vrindavan is not the material world, but this Gokul Vrindavan is manifested within the material world. So by Krishna's arrangement, sometimes the materialistic people like Putana, Aghasura, Trinavata, they're allowed to come in. It's their great fortune, they're allowed to come in to get killed by Krishna. Prabhupada mentions that in one of the purports, that Kamsa was sending such and such a demon. I can't remember, maybe it was Keshi or whatever. Actually, he was sending him to get killed by Krishna. He was sending him to kill Krishna, but actually what was happening, he was sending him to be killed by Krishna. So they all have their role, all these demons. Even Hiranyakashipu, we're very grateful to him. We're very glad that Hiranyakashipu came, because he came, and because of him, actually, Nrsimhadev came. So they all have their role to play, but the point is that in this material world, things don't go right. It's the very nature of this material world, and there are always so many problems. But if we remember Krishna, then we cross over this material world and go to Krishna, as Prabhupada told Indradyumna Maharaj, a story which he never tires of telling, and it's very nice to hear again and again, how at Heathrow Airport Prabhupada arrived, and he was left with the job of picking up Prabhupada's baggage, which had arrived late. So it was huge, and it was like 2 huge suitcases. Even though, he's pretty strong even now, but to carry 2 huge suitcases, and at that time the tube didn't go up to Heathrow Airport. So anyway, somehow or other he got these 2 huge. Maybe he's adding a little. Anyway, whatever it was, 2 heavy bags and carry. Somehow or other he got them into central London, and then you have to go up the stairs to Prabhupada's cottage in the very place temple. And somehow or other there's no one around there, all with Prabhupada. So you had to carry these. And then he just put them in the door and fell down on the ground to offer obeisances. And after his arms falling off and his whole body aching, and then he felt someone slap him on the back. He looked up, there was Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, as long as we're in this material world, there's so many difficulties. But when you go back to Godhead, there are no more difficulties. So, that is the aim of the devotees, to go back to Godhead. And how to think of Krishna. Think of Krishna. And then things more or less work. I mean, even if there are difficulties in the material world, everything becomes nice if we think of Krishna. What is happiness? What is distress? You'll often find, it's actually very common that you'll find people like they lose their legs in an accident or something like that, and they're very joyful. They're quite happy. They accept. Oh, all right, and they go on with life. Whereas often you'll find someone, they've got everything. You know, they have Janmaishvarya Shutashri. They're born in a good family. And they're good looking and intelligent and so many things, and they're miserable. Even the psychologists say that. They say that it's good to be religious because you see, it's good, helps to keep you happy. You see, so that's the goal of life, to be happy. Therefore, it's good to be religious. There's no God, but it's good to be religious. It's good psychiatry. Tell people to believe in God. So Yudhishthira Maharaj, of course, he was always thinking of Krishna. And the whole battle was fought for his sake, actually, because Krishna wanted that he would be on the throne. But as a saintly person, Prabhupada also mentioned about Arjuna, he didn't want to kill. That's a sign of a saintly person. He wanted to avoid it if necessary. So he's thinking, this is very horrible. So much nastiness has taken place, and I am responsible. So later on, he'll get instructed by Bhishma to do the same thing, actually, which Krishna told him. Krishna himself told him that. Krishna explained the philosophy of life to him. But it was only when Bhishma spoke to him that he understood the point by Krishna's arrangement, that although Krishna was the guru of Arjuna, but what he had to say, that the same thing he said to Yudhishthira, somehow at that time he didn't touch Yudhishthira's hand. When he heard it from Bhishma, then he accepted that the same points which were discussed, although he's a pure devotee, but he appears to be lamenting on the material platform. He saw Bhishma Deva and saw Bhishma lying on a bed of arrows. When someone's talking about detachment lying on a bed of arrows, you can understand they're not just talking theoretically. That it was painful, no doubt. And so he was lying there, and he was fully detached from the body and from the pain, and he was just going on he was just waiting for the Uttarayana. It might have been more difficult for Yudhishthira to accept Krishna, even though he knows Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. But in the pastime, according to their relationship, then Krishna is a younger cousin brother. So generally people don't like to listen to anyone younger than them. Especially, well, in modern culture no one likes to listen to anyone. But Vedic culture it's very stratified. In modern society, it's considered everyone's all the same and everyone's equal, and no one gives a damn about anyone. You don't listen to anyone. But in Vedic culture it's very stratified. Everyone has their specific position within society, and how you relate to others according to your caste, according to your age, according to your qualification, your learning. There are so many ways in which it's that's why traditionally when people meet, they'll say that actually it's obvious who's junior, and often it will be obvious because different castes, they dress in different ways. So you can understand just by looking who's a Brahmana, who's a Kshatriya, who's a Vaishya, all these kinds of things. So then they'll see who are you, where are you from, and like this. If it's mentioned that I am a student of so and so, the guru, his name may not be told directly, but we understood. And if he's a disciple of that guru, then he should be just like this, because that guru teachers like that. So many things are understood. So the Yudhishthira, he might not have wanted to take instruction from the social point of view. That according to Leela, he was superior. He is some. Krishna is always coming in and bowing down before Yudhishthira. But he took instruction from Krishna, same instruction. Then he understood. Here, Bhishma taught, eventually Yudhishthira is lamenting and Krishna brought him to Yudhishthira. Let's all go and see Bhishma. Bhishma Dev instructed. And Bhishma Dev told Yudhishthira, you see, here is standing before you Krishna, and he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Why are you lamenting in his presence? Everything is done by him. The same thing Krishna said, oh, yes, I understand. So Yudhishthira is lamenting. That is his pious. Duryodhana, he wasn't thinking, oh, so many people will die. He didn't care, because he's a politician. He wants, I should get the position. It doesn't matter if people are killed. That is the politician's own. But Yudhishthira, although he was a king means a politician. But he was a very noble person. He wasn't interested in grabbing the power for his own sake. But he simply wanted to take the position to serve others. That was the king's motive. He would take the position to serve others, and then you'll find many of them. As soon as their oldest son is grown up, old enough, immediately go to the forest. They're not attached to the position. And that is shown by their renounce, immediately renounce. And they would take the position of king, not to exploit others, but to arrange society by their God-given gifts. They were suited to do so. The God-given gifts, and they were trained to do so, to rule the kingdom for the benefit of others. So that, even though they were apparently very attached, Kshatriyas, it appears they're very attached. They have a big palace and lots of bodyguards. It means a big, whatever they go, there'll be so many people with them, and they may have. Generally, Kshatriyas will have several wives, and they may several or even many wives. Maybe even hundreds or thousands of wives. Even if each wife comes with so many maidservants, it appears they're very attached, but at the same time, they're cultivating detachment, because they're hearing from Brahmanas from the beginning of their lives. They hear from Brahmanas, they go on hearing. And then the saintly kings, as soon as there's an opportunity, immediately, now go to the forest. My duty is done. My son is old enough, he's trained, he's responsible, he's ready. Alright, you become the king, I'm going. I'm going to take up spiritual life. So this Vedic culture, the spiritual life is always in the forefront. Now, spiritual life means Krishna, so now it appears that Vrndavana is ready to... He's always in the forefront, but he's just offered puja and dress and so on. So now, again, and we'll finish the class here. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam. I also want to say, there are probably millions of karmis who are in one sense more fortunate than devotees. You know why? Can you imagine? This is a riddle, it's like Yaksha Prashna. Because they got books distributed to them by Manida Prabhu. This is your opportunity. Anyway, I have a few books. Beginner's Guide to Krishna Consciousness, Ramayana, 2 books about Prabhupada, how we should remember Prabhupada and serve his mission. A message to the youth of India. You didn't get that. I don't bring that to Dubai and Abu Dhabi, because I'm afraid the customs will catch me. I wonder, what's that book? So that book you don't have. Brahmacharya, a few different books. So if anyone would like to take, they're available. And some CDs of lectures. So, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Yeah, it's actually from the Gita Press edition. From the Gita Press. It's a synopsis of the Gita. Their translations are good. I mean, they're faithful. They're not distorted. So it's a synopsis of that with a little bit of added philosophical insight. And also an introduction. You see, the thing is that I used to see devotees, they all have this Kamala Subramanian's Vrndavana edition, which is totally Mayavad. So I thought that everyone likes to read Ramayana, but instead of having this Mayavad edition, you should have one which is Vaishnava edition. So I wrote an introduction and said, you have to understand Ram is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And at the same time, actually, as I brought this out, 2 other editions came out, which other ISKCON devotees were doing this. Anyway, now it's out, we might as well distribute it. But I think this is good in the sense that it has some philosophical comment also, which is also important. Mostly so. Comments. So,
I have a question.
Yeah?
At this position of someone who somehow or other perform his activities to satisfy Krishna, or do something because Krishna ordered or spiritual master ordered, but he doesn't remember Krishna during his actions.
He doesn't remember Krishna during his actions.
Yeah, because Krishna told Arjuna 5
Well, Prabhupada said that if you're working for Krishna, then naturally you'll remember Krishna. And if you don't remember Krishna, then you won't go on working for Krishna. If someone's cleaning the floor in the temple and they think, why am I doing this? I can do the same thing in a factory and get some money for doing it. Then they'll stop remembering Krishna and they'll go to the factory. So you have to, if you don't remember Krishna, you can't go and serve Krishna. Whatever we do for Krishna, even if we do just for one day or for 1 minute, then we may forget, we may never even think of Krishna, but Krishna doesn't forget. That's not called bhakti, that's called bhakti anmukhi sukriti. If we do an activity for Krishna without knowing that it's for Krishna, then that means an activity which is prior to devotional service, or it leads to devotional service. It's not actually bhakti, but it helps us to come to bhakti. But all the activities that we're doing, we're supposed to remember Krishna. Directly or indirectly. Just like once Prabhupada, he was at an airport in San Francisco, and the lady at the check-in counter or whatever asked him that, what's this all about? And Prabhupada said, this Krishna consciousness. What's that? He said, always to think of Krishna. He said, how can you always think of Krishna? And Prabhupada asked him that, he said, you're doing your job, but you always remember, isn't it, that you have to keep your hair nice, and your dress should look nice and everything. You're always aware of that, isn't it? So it's just like that. You may not be directly thinking all the time about how my dress looks and how my hair looks, but always conscious of that. So, if for some reason someone's bag falls down, and she goes to catch it and her head gets upset, then immediately, and then when she gets the chance to go in the restroom, as they call it in America, I don't know, you want to rest in the toilet, that's what they call it. And then she'll make sure her hair is nice. So always conscious, it should be looking nice. So Prabhupada gave that example, that we're working for Krishna. We're always conscious actually it's for Krishna. You can see the difference. If someone's conscious that this is for Krishna, then there's a difference. If you're not doing it with conscientiousness, then there's a difference. You see, if you're cooking, then you're just, I have to do this off. Okay, get it finished as quickly as possible. It won't be the same as a cooking, which is cooked with love for Krishna. There's a difference, isn't there? Everyone can understand. If you're somehow or other doing your job, I have to do puja anyway. Alright. Then it won't be very much, but if you're thinking how to make everything else, what is this statue? I have to weave this incense. But if we're thinking how to please Krishna, there'll definitely be a difference.